Congresswoman Shirley Chisholm, the first Black woman ever elected to the United States Congress, once said, "If they don't give you a seat at the table, bring in a folding chair." When I was in high school, I was a member of Beta Club, which is a service and leadership club, and I was Mississippi State President. At the time, the club roughly consisted of 40% boys and 60% girls. I was invited to compete at the national convention to run for National Beta Club President. I was against 10 boys and 2 girls. I remember standing on a stage like this, looking out into an audience filled with women, and I was appalled at the lack of representation reflected on stage. My name is Muriel Collins, and that day I realized I wanted to encourage more women to run for office. I'm a native Mississippian. I graduated summa cum laude from Mississippi College with a degree in political science, and I'm now a first-year law student here at the University of Mississippi School of Law. I aspire to work in the political and legal field as an advocate for women, and tonight I want to share with you why I believe more women should be involved in politics. First, I'm going to talk to you about some reasons why women aren't as involved in government right now. Then I'm going to talk about the problem. Mississippi ranks low, if not last, in nationwide rankings. And one of the reasons behind that is we don't have a lot of women involved in our government, and objectives are being missed. Then I'm going to provide some solutions on how we can change that. So how many of you watch, listen, or read the news? Raise your hand. You're like, we're at a TED Talk, of course we watch the news. Well, then all of you have seen that there has been an exponential growth of women not only running for office, but also getting elected to Congress on the national level. This is great news. However, women are just now really getting into the political field, so they're starting to gain the credentials that male candidates already have. If we look at Mississippi government, we see a lot of older white men who have the incumbency advantage, which limits minority and victories. This includes women. In fact, political administrators tend to seek out male candidates over female candidates. The gender gap is apparent, and this decreases a woman's desire to run for office. In 2005, Tricia Ruiz wrote an article that talked about feminist theory and international relations. She said, policymakers, heads of government, and academic professionals are typically males who come from strong patriarchal social and political backgrounds. Thus, discussions within government tend to be constrained by those who lack consideration for a woman's role in government. Ruiz says that this could be because these men were not trained to value and include a woman's perspective. She also says that gender may be structuring the way we think. And by gendering viewpoints, we're missing women's objectives. Earlier, I told you Mississippi ranks low, if not last, in nationwide rankings. This includes Mississippi ranking 49th in education, and we have low rates of infant mortality and also high rates of teen pregnancy. Because of this, these are things that are major issues today in Mississippi, and they concern women's health. But traditionally, in government, we see women as promoters of diplomacy and local relations. A modern example of this would be Republican women standing front row at Trump rallies holding signs that say, "Women for Trump." One of my favorite examples would be Jackie O when she did the European tour with JFK. She could speak French, and in France she was oohed and awed because she was so posh and elegant. And she really represented what America was in the 60s. But perceptions aside, women play such a critical role in not only society, but also government. Ruiz talks about how when women are involved in government and we see that gender equality, there's an increased use of not only diplomacy, but also compromise. Now I want all of you to think about security. What does that mean to you? According to Ruiz, feminists view security as safety from rape, abuse, and sex trafficking from domestic and foreign perpetrators. Now, I know I just said the F word, feminist, and many of you do not identify as one, and that's okay. I just want to call your attention that all of us have the same values, that we would like to be safe from rape, abuse, and sex trafficking from domestic and foreign perpetrators. The question I want to pose is Mississippi prioritizing women's security? Over the summer, I had the opportunity to sit in on a lot of women's groups that were lobbying for harsher penalties for sex trafficking. There was a bill that was in the works in the legislature at the time. In 2019, in November, the Clarion Ledger posted this article talking about how Mississippi is now an A-rated state for its sex trafficking laws. And this talked about how there are now harsher penalties for those involved in sex trafficking, and minors that are involved in prostitution will now be viewed as victims. This is great. Mississippi's not last on this list. However, what I found very interesting was only 6 years ago, Mississippi was a D-rated state for sex trafficking. And to me, it wasn't until that I saw these women over the summer promoting this legislation and saying, sex trafficking is a big deal, this is something that we're all concerned about, but we need to prioritize this and get this legislation passed. As a political scientist, I understand that legislation takes a long time just to get through Congress, and change doesn't just happen in a day. However, when we have more women involved in government, we're getting a more complete, fuller picture of what the citizens of Mississippi prioritize. And if we look at our government right now, we're seriously lacking in our female participation. As of right now, Mississippi legislature, we don't even have a quarter of female representation in the Senate. We only have 13.9% of women participation in the House of Representatives. Out of the 8 elected officials in the state, only 1 is a female. If we look on the federal level, we do have 1 female senator. She's the first in Mississippi history. And for the House of Representatives, on the federal level for Mississippi, we've never had a female representative. Ruiz says that for women to take the next step forward and get involved in government, they must first feel secure in their state and feel safe from being over-sexualized or abused because of their gender or their rank in society. Now, if we apply Ruiz's research to Mississippi statistics, we see that women do have some reservations on their security. And this could be a reason why we don't have more women involved in our government. So what can we do about this? Well, we can open the conversation to women. We can have their perspectives being shared, and then we can listen to them. Believe it or not, women do have an interest in the state. And if you're thinking, how? Women not only care about their security, healthcare, education, but also their children's and their family's security, healthcare, and education. But when governments are flexible to women in the state and hearing their perspectives, that's when we're going to see a positive change in the political environment. So the number one way we can encourage more women to run for office would be to stop gender stereotyping. By telling women, you're being too emotional, or could you be more accommodating? Or by telling them that they need to stick to more domestic roles, such as cooking, cleaning, taking care of the children. But if they're going to have a career, stick to something a lot of women do, like teaching or nursing. We need to break this stigma of saying women can only have specific roles in society. Ways you can do this is by pointing it out. If you're listening to the radio or watching a movie, and there's something sexist or offensive being said, point it out. Be the person to say, that's really offensive. Chances are people around you don't even recognize that something sexist was being said, and so then they're going to be more cognizant later on. You can also speak up. If someone's saying a sexist or offensive joke, challenge them. And you can also be the example. If there is a role that you want to take that typically women wouldn't pursue, do it. Go for it. Be an engineer. Be an attorney. Or be the first woman to run for the Mississippi legislature on the federal level. Number 2 would be to get involved with pro-women organizations. You can do this by just going online. There's so many organizations that want to encourage and help women run for office. They help with establishing a campaign team, finding donors, and gaining access to volunteers. And if you're not a woman wanting to run for Congress, you can join with these organizations, and they will direct you to a candidate in your area that you can help support. I highly suggest this. This is a great idea, and there's so many organizations out there. And then finally, you. Encouragement from you. All of you in this audience play a role. You are a family member, a friend, teacher, mentor, and you could be that person that encourages a girl or a woman in your life to run for office, either in her school, city, county, state, maybe even the nation. But if they get that push from you and you telling them, you can do it, you got this, that's going to mean the world. So in conclusion, I realize not every woman wants to run for government. That's okay. Not every man wants to run. But that path for men seems to be a lot easier than it is for women. And my goal is to make that path just as accessible for women as it is for men. Without equal representation in our government, we will continue to have abuse, neglect, and unsafe environments for women. As you can see, I brought you a folding chair. All I ask is for you to fill that space and use your voice. Thank you so much.